8 p.m. A live broadcast threatening the total annihilation of an entire civilization. 11:30 p.m. A signature on an executive order granting a 2-week extension. The media is calling this a masterclass in diplomacy. They are lying to you. This is not diplomacy. This is a frantic cover-up of a catastrophic military failure. And the proof did not happen in Washington. It happened at exactly 02:15 a.m. in the deserts of Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates. Let us look at the verified timeline. At 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the ceasefire was signed. The geopolitical chessboard was supposedly frozen. But the reality of modern asymmetric warfare does not care about signatures. Less than 3 hours later, the night sky over the Gulf ignited. Multiple explosions. Critical infrastructure at the Kuwait Oil Company. Fuel storage sites in the UAE. Burning. The governments immediately locked down the sites. An intelligence blackout. Why? Because of a single number they do not want the markets to realize. Let this number sink in. 20,000. 20,000 US dollars. That is the price of one Iranian-designed Shahed 136 loitering munition. Plywood and a propeller. The American commander-in-chief can sign a truce with politicians in Tehran. But that signature is completely powerless against a $20,000 drone launched from a mobile proxy site in the dark. Do not click away. Because the smoke from those burning oil tanks is not staying in the Middle East. It is heading straight for your wallet, your supply chain, and the pump where you buy your gas. Let's dissect the anatomy of this failure. That is development number 1. Which brings us to the second reality on the ground, the kinetic sequence. To understand the explosions at 02:15 a.m., you must erase the Hollywood image of modern warfare. There were no stealth bombers scrambling from a tarmac. There were no intercontinental ballistic missiles crossing the stratosphere. The strike did not originate from a heavily guarded, sovereign military base inside Iran. It was launched from the back of commercial flatbed trucks. Hidden in the dunes, highly mobile, completely untraceable. The proxy forces do not need a reinforced runway. They only need a set of coordinates and a dark night. Let us examine the primary munition, the Shahed 136 loitering munition. It is not a marvel of aerospace engineering. It is a triumph of brutal asymmetric economics. It features a simple delta-wing airframe. It runs on a commercial 2-stroke engine that sounds like a lawnmower. It carries a 50-kilogram high-explosive fragmentation warhead. It does not communicate with a satellite mid-flight. It cannot be jammed by cutting its signal because there is no signal to cut. It relies on a pre-programmed GNSS and an internal inertial navigation system. Once it leaves the launch rail, it goes dark. It flies low, very low, skimming the surface of the Persian Gulf 10 meters above the water, utilizing the curvature of the Earth to stay beneath the radar horizon of standard air defense systems. It is slow. But speed is completely irrelevant when you possess absolute mass. The most critical specification is the manufacturing cost, $20,000. For the price of a used sedan, the proxies can manufacture a precision-guided strike asset. Now look at the target zone. The airspace over Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates is supposedly protected by the most sophisticated and expensive air defense umbrella on the planet. The MIM-104 Patriot PAC-3 system. This is the crown jewel of American defense contracting. It features an active electronically scanned array radar. It utilizes hit-to-kill kinetic interceptors. It is designed to track and destroy hypersonic ballistic threats in the upper atmosphere. But there is a fatal flaw in the architecture. It is not a flaw in the physics of the missile. It is a flaw in the financial accounting. One single PAC-3 interceptor costs $4 million. At exactly 02:15 a.m., the swarm entered the engagement zone. Not a single high-value target, a saturated multi-vector wave. This is the doctrine of logistical attrition. The radar screens inside the Allied command centers did not show a clear tactical picture. They showed a wall of static moving at 180 kilometers per hour. The systems were flooded with telemetry data. The automated defense protocols engaged. The Patriot batteries fired. Put yourself in the command seat for a moment. You track the incoming bogeys. You authorize the launch sequence. You watch your $4 million interceptors streak into the night sky. You register the kinetic impacts. Targets destroyed. But the wave does not stop. The radar screen remains fully saturated. Then, the critical indicator on your console illuminates. Empty magazine. A Patriot battery holds a maximum of 16 PAC-3 missiles per launcher. Once they are fired, you cannot simply press a button to reload. It requires heavy logistics vehicles, cranes, exposed personnel, and hours of critical downtime. Hours you do not have. Do the math on the engagement. Firing a $4 million missile to intercept a $20,000 drone is a 200-to-1 negative return on investment. It is the equivalent of utilizing a specialized surgical laser to eradicate a swarm of locusts. You will absolutely kill the locust you target, but the machine will overheat, the power will drain, and the rest of the swarm will consume the field anyway. That is the clinical reality of the 02:15 a.m. strike. The proxies did not defeat the American radar network. They defeated the American supply chain. Once the Patriot batteries ran dry, the remaining 80% of the swarm passed through the completely undefended airspace. They struck the Kuwait oil company infrastructure. They impacted the fuel storage sites in the UAE. The fire suppression systems were instantly overwhelmed by the multiple detonation points. The local governments initiated an immediate intelligence blackout. They locked down the perimeters. They confiscated phones. They did this not to hide the physical damage. They did it to hide the mathematical humiliation. The Gulf states realized in real time that the multi-billion-dollar American security umbrella they purchased is functionally useless against a warehouse of plywood drones. The shield did not crack. It simply went bankrupt. But the kinetic strike was just the beginning. The real bleeding started when the global markets opened. That is the escalation bridge. We move from the physical battlefield to the financial one. The kinetic strike concluded at roughly 02:30 a.m. local time. But the true damage did not register on a military radar. It registered on the server racks of the New York Mercantile Exchange. 15 minutes. That is all it took. 15 minutes after the first Shahed 136 detonated in Kuwait, before the local emergency protocols were even fully activated, the high-frequency trading algorithms detected the satellite heat signatures. The automated systems calculated the loss. They executed their buy orders. Brent crude futures spiked. $105 a barrel. Let me repeat that number. $105. This is not a market fluctuation. This is a structural shock. The mainstream media will summarize this as a temporary jump at the gas pump. They treat you like a child. Let us look at the adult mathematics of the global supply chain. The intelligence blackout in the Gulf attempted to hide the scope of the fires. But you cannot hide a disruption of this magnitude from the commodities market. The targeted facilities in Kuwait and the UAE do not merely store local fuel. They process, refine, and export a massive fraction of global energy, 12%. 12% of the entire Gulf refining and export capacity went offline in a matter of seconds. To understand the catastrophic nature of that metric, you must understand how the global oil market functions. It does not operate with massive safety buffers. It operates on a razor-thin margin of excess capacity. A supply disruption of 1 or 2% creates intense price volatility. A sudden, violent extraction of 12% is not a volatility event. It is an economic heart attack. The proxy forces in the desert understand this perfectly. This is the core doctrine of weaponized inflation. They know they cannot defeat the United States Navy in a direct, symmetrical naval engagement. They do not have to. They bypass the military theater entirely and attack the baseline commodity of the American way of life. You have been told for years that the United States is energy independent. You have been told that domestic production in Texas and the Dakotas insulates the homeland from Middle Eastern chaos. That is a political lie designed for campaign season. Petroleum is a globally fungible commodity. The crude oil pumped in the Permian Basin is priced on the global index. When 12% of Gulf capacity burns, the price of every single barrel of oil on the planet surges, including the ones beneath American soil. The fire is 6,000 miles away, but the economic blast wave hits your hometown before you wake up. Let us trace the ripple effect. Let us follow the $105 barrel of oil directly into your daily life. First, it hits the logistics network. Diesel fuel. Diesel is the absolute lifeblood of the American supply chain. It powers the freight trains. It fuels the massive fleet of semi-trucks transporting every single consumer good across the interstate highway system. When diesel prices spike, the shipping conglomerates immediately apply fuel surcharges. The cost of moving a piece of lumber, a microchip, or a gallon of milk from a warehouse to a retail shelf increases instantly. Second, it hits the agricultural sector. The modern American food supply is entirely dependent on petrochemicals. Natural gas and petroleum byproducts are the fundamental building blocks of industrial fertilizers. When the cost of the raw material surges, the cost of the fertilizer surges. The profit margins of the American farmer are decimated. That cost is not absorbed by the agricultural corporations. It is passed directly down the line. It shows up in the price of bread, meat, and vegetables at your local grocery store. Third, it hits the manufacturing base. Look around your room. Look at the device you are using to watch this briefing. Plastics, polymers, synthetic fibers, pharmaceuticals, they are all derivatives of crude oil. This is the true cost of asymmetric warfare. Inflation is not an accident of the free market. In this context, it is a directed energy weapon. It is a silent, unlegislated tax extracted from your savings account without your consent. The government will not call it a war tax because they refuse to admit they are losing the war. But the mathematics are undeniable. The political elite in Washington treat foreign policy like a grand geopolitical game. They draw lines on maps. They deploy multi-billion-dollar carrier strike groups to project power. But when their $4 million Patriot missiles fail to intercept $20,000 drones, they do not pay the price. Their portfolios are hedged. Their supply chains are guaranteed. Their salaries are insulated. You are the one who pays. The American middle class is the ultimate shock absorber for the geopolitical arrogance of the political class. Every time you fill your gas tank at a premium, every time your grocery bill increases by 20%, you are personally subsidizing the failure of the American security umbrella. You are paying the geopolitical tax levied by a proxy force operating from the back of a pickup truck in the desert. They did not just burn Kuwaiti oil. They incinerated the purchasing power of the American dollar. $105 a barrel. $105. And that brings us to the most insulting part of this entire operation. The official narrative being spun in Washington. That is the economic reality, which brings us to the political fiction. Let us rewind the timeline. Just a few hours before the sky caught fire over the Gulf, 11:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Pentagon press briefing room. The ink on the temporary 2-week truce is barely dry. Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder steps to the podium. He addresses the assembled press corps. He delivers this exact verbatim statement. The ceasefire agreement is strictly in effect. Our defensive umbrella guarantees the security of our Gulf allies and the uninterrupted flow of global energy. Listen to that quote again. Our defensive umbrella guarantees the security. Less than 3 hours later, that guaranteed security was burning uncontrollably in Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates. This is the core of the contradiction. The political elite in Washington are operating under an obsolete operational framework. They believe they are still governing the 20th century. They believe that if they secure a signature from a diplomat in a tailored suit in Tehran, the battlefield is frozen. They do not understand the architecture of modern proxy warfare. The men who launched the swarm at 02:15 a.m. do not wear suits. They do not attend diplomatic summits in Geneva. They operate mobile launch rails mounted on commercial flatbed trucks in the desert. They exist entirely outside the diplomatic control grid. This was not a miscalculation. This was not a rogue faction acting out of turn. This was a deliberate, calculated masterclass in exploiting the geopolitical gray zone. Examine the target selection. Why did the swarm strike the Kuwait Oil Company and the Emirati fuel depots? Why did they not aim the drones directly at a United States Navy aircraft carrier transiting the region? Because the proxy commanders understand American political red lines better than the Americans do. If a Shahed drone strikes a multi-billion-dollar carrier, it guarantees an overwhelming, symmetrical military response. It triggers Tomahawk cruise missile strikes. It initiates a theater-wide kinetic war. But striking an Arab ally's oil infrastructure? That creates the ultimate shield. Plausible deniability. Tehran can officially deny involvement. They can point to the freshly signed ceasefire agreement. They can claim the regional proxy forces acted completely independently. Washington knows this is a lie. The intelligence agencies know it is a lie, but they cannot definitively prove the chain of command in a way that legally justifies a retaliatory strike, without Washington looking like the aggressor who broke the truce. So Washington is strategically paralyzed. And while Washington is paralyzed, the true objective is achieved. The fracturing of the Arab alliance from within. Put yourself in the position of a Gulf monarch this morning. For decades, your national security strategy has been entirely dependent on the American defense contractor. You purchased the multi-billion-dollar Patriot batteries. You hosted the American military bases. You signed the treaties. The implicit contract was simple. We host your forces, we buy your hardware, and you protect our airspace. Last night, that contract was rendered null and void. The Arab leaders watched the $4 million interceptors run dry. They watched the $20,000 drones bypass the radar horizon. They realized with terrifying clarity that the American umbrella is nothing but a highly expensive illusion. It is a psychological comfort blanket that catches fire the moment it is tested by absolute mass. When an ally realizes you cannot protect them, they do not ask for more weapons. They begin looking for a new security guarantor. Behind closed doors, the diplomatic cables are already shifting. The capitals in the Gulf will now have to negotiate back-channel agreements directly with the proxy sponsors. They will have to pay the extortion fee because the American shield is fundamentally bankrupt. The American empire is not being defeated by a superior conventional military force. It is being isolated. It is being bypassed. The hegemony is fracturing not from a massive frontal assault, but from 1,000 tiny cuts inflicted by plywood drones. And while the alliance crumbles in the desert, the Pentagon spokesperson stands at a podium in Washington and claims the umbrella is secure. The disconnect between the briefing room and the battlefield is absolute. We have discussed the macroeconomic data. We have analyzed the ballistic trajectories and the financial indices. Now, we remove the geopolitical lens. We step entirely away from the briefing room in Washington. In the intelligence community, human loss is routinely sanitized into operational metrics. They classify it as collateral impact. But the raw data always contains a micro-reality. Amidst the encrypted traffic regarding radar failures and crude oil futures, a specific 5-second digital file leaked onto the secure networks before the localized blackout took effect. It is not a high-altitude satellite scan. It is a standard closed-circuit television feed. Camera 4. Perimeter fence. The Al Amati pumping station in Kuwait. The timestamp reads exactly 02:14:55 a.m. The subject in the center of the frame is a man named Tariq, 34 years old, a night shift maintenance engineer. He is not a combatant. He is not a proxy operative. He is a civilian technician wearing standard industrial protective equipment. There is no grand political strategy in this 5-second window. There is only the absolute indifferent application of physics. At 02:14:57 a.m., the camera's audio sensors register an acoustic anomaly, the low-frequency mechanical hum of a commercial 2-stroke propeller engine cutting through the desert wind. Tariq halts his patrol route. In his right hand, he is holding a standard short-range radio transceiver. He does not run. He does not press an alarm. He simply tilts his head upward toward the pitch-black sky. He is looking directly at the terminal approach vector of a $20,000 piece of aerodynamic plywood. The machine holds no political ideology. It carries no hatred. It only carries a pre-programmed set of GNSS coordinates and a 50-kilogram high-explosive fragmentation warhead. It is functioning precisely as designed. There is no cinematic score. There is no final statement. The drone intersects with the primary pipeline junction exactly 30 meters from Tariq's physical position. The video feed does not display the aftermath. It only captures the instantaneous, blinding flash of thermal expansion and the initial distortion of the kinetic shock wave displacing the oxygen in the air around him. The frame turns completely white. The data stream terminates. A 34-year-old engineer, a pre-programmed coordinate, a fractional calculation in the mathematics of global energy policy.